Yeah, just let me know. I'll try to stay on focus and
We don't ever.
We never stay unfocused. Our goal is to
Oh, okay.
distract you as much as possible
Uh-oh.
along the way. In
That
fact, I'm
night.
gonna distract you right out of the gates, Sean. You
Yeah.
you have a history with Nike, is that correct?
Oh, what was it? A history at Nike?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, with the Nike elite team. Yes.
Okay. So we were just talking about the alpha flies before you hopped on and so rudely interrupted.
Yeah.
And I had a pair of alpha flies that I had to glue back together because I'm trying to get extra life out of them. Do you have an opinion on the fastest alpha fly of them all, Sean? And what shoe you like the most?
Oh, oh, that's, are we being taped now? I hope.
We can take anything out you want. We're
Yeah,
not
well,
live.
no, that's an interesting question. I don't have any. It's been a little while since we did testing of shoes, but I'll give you a little bit of setup in our clinic in Eugene. I'd never had such access to a running community, and Eugene is the mecca of running. So I started treating a lot of high school kids, South Eugene High School in particular, that has you can go all the way back into 1960s and 70s. And historically, they turned out quite a few amazing runners, Olympic trials, Olympians, and so forth. So then after I worked with the South Eugene High School kids, I started working in with the University of Oregon. I taught in the human physiology department, which gave me access to one of the basketball coaches, the head associate coach at the time, Mike Dunlop, who was friends with Alberto Salazar. And then through Alberto, I ended up treating some of the Nike elite runners. At that time, it was probably around 2008. Most of them were the 800 meters. There were a whole bunch of them. Nick Simmons was the one that comes to mind. Never worked with him, worked with a lot of his other colleagues. But since I had such access to runners, we went ahead and we purchased a bunch of research equipment, including one of them was a treadmill. It's a pressure sensor treadmill, very expensive. Probably at that time, it was probably $45,000 to $50,000 for that treadmill, but it's probably 75 to 100,000 now. So not something that we were the first ones to have it in the country. And so they kind of gave me a discount at that time as long as I would purchase it. So we got the pressure sensor treadmill. We got the electromyography. And what that is, when you move a muscle, it generates an electrical current. So we would use the electrodes, we put them on like the gluteal muscles and the tensor fascia lata muscles and looking at ratios. And then we went ahead and we bought a Biodex isokinetic device to measure strength. So when these elite runners were coming in, we had the pressure sensor data, electromyography, measure isokinetic strength. And so what we would do in terms of shoes, coming back to that, was we'd bring the runners in and run them on the treadmill with 4 to 5 different pairs of shoes to see which one gave us the best pressure contact. I think at that time had much more of a preference for Brooks. The Nike shoes at that time, maybe this is a little controversial, but it seemed like they were more interested, at least in the 90s and in the early 2000s, more on what the shoe looked like from the biomechanical design. And that was the feedback I'd get anonymously from some of the runners as well. You had to wear, if you were being sponsored by Nike or Brooks, you had to wear their shoe. So I don't have a strong preference at this point. It's probably been about 5 years since we did these studies, but I'm moving actually back over I live in Central Oregon right now in Redmond, above Bern. I'm moving back over to Eugene here in the next 2 months. And we have a 3D capture system. We have the pressure sensor treadmill, which I have not worked on. I had a clinic over there that I sold to 2 younger physical therapists, 35, 40 years of age. And I'm going to go back and work with them to try and get the running research back up off the ground. Since I left, there hasn't been a lot of that. So what I would say in about 2 to 3 weeks, especially if you guys have questions, I can have people come bring different pairs of shoes in and we can test them. The pressure sensor data is amazing. Here, a perfect example, you'd have a runner that would say, well, I'm a 4-foot striker. And I'm like, well, how do you know that? Well, I just know that. Well, 75 to 80% of everybody is going to run. They're going to hit the heel. They just do it so quickly. They don't pick up on that fact. You can't get outside the objectivity of the pressure sensor treadmill. So a lot of people thought they're mid 4-foot strikers. They're not. Most people are going to strike on their heel. They're just going to do it very quickly. So to answer your question in a more credible fashion, I say, and that next over the next 4 to 6 weeks, I could have some athletes come in with a bunch of different shoes, and we could run them on the pressure sensor treadmill. We used to have runners come in with 4 to 5 different pairs of shoes, or a shoe that was similar, to see if that same shoe had the same pattern. And sometimes that was different. It's like when you get a pair of shoes that you like, you usually buy, maybe, well, if you're a Nike, you usually get 20, 30 pairs of the same shoes. But sometimes, even though it was the same brand shoe, same type of shoe, we would get a different pressure sensor reading, which is really fascinating. That pressure sensor treadmill, as with any other device, the number one question you'd have should be, is this device reliable? So let's say you come in and you're going to run on this pressure sensor treadmill. If I were to have you run for, say, 5 minutes and have you step off, if you get back on, considering that you're not fatigued, and ran for 5 minutes, how reliable are the patterns I saw from session 1, 5 minutes, and then session 2? And that pressure sensor treadmill, the reliability is amazing. I mean, it is spot on. So first off, we have a reliable tool. It will consistently measure things over and over and over. And then you can get into the question of the validity. Is it measuring what we want it to measure? So reliability needs to come first. If you have a tool that's measuring something different every time, it's certainly not going to be valid. This is one of those. So this treadmill is what kind of got us focusing on the wearable device. And we were trying to take something from, like very few people would have access to this equipment. So how could we get this equipment, one, off the treadmill and outside? And then how could we make it readily accessible, to everybody yeah.
All right. So question for you about reliability of treadmill.
Yeah.
Because from our perspective, we work with everyday run-of-the-mill athletes, people without access to a high-performance training center. And one of the big issues they run into is that all treadmills are calibrated slightly differently, and that calibration stays exactly the same as the treadmill ages, and the speed, the pace, incline rarely is reliable once it leaves the production facility. So with your 6-figure treadmill, how do you ensure reliability over time of your treadmill? So I guess first question is the belt or the running surface itself, the tread. What type of surface is that? A slat based? Is that a continuous looped belt? What is the surface, and how do you keep it reliable?
It's a good question. I mean, you're challenging me, Cooper. Do you have a response? Can Cooper step in for a moment?
Yeah, come on over.
Yeah,
Cooper.
because this is
Let's make it a party.
Well, we had this at one point. We had to take this treadmill apart.
Yeah.
The pressure sensor broke. It's a very delicate device, but it took us almost 6 months to figure out with the German company how to fix it.
Really?
So Cooper, whose background is in physics, more of an engineering in physics, applied physics, it took him almost 6 months to figure this out. So how would you answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, so basically we have to maintain it.
Mhm.
So we're constantly lubing it up and maintaining, and then it's got a deck, it's actually a wooden deck, but then it's got a layer on top with the pressure sensor. So it's got little cells that each are a pressure sensor. Over time, that started to kind of delaminate, and we ended up sending the whole deck. Like we took the whole thing apart and sent it back to Germany. And that's a whole story in itself. But they lost it somewhere along the way. But anyway, it's back. So it did degrade. I mean, that was we probably had it for 7 years or something before it came to that. And so maintenance is.
What is the surface type that you're striking with your feet?
So it's a belt.
And does that have stretch or give to it over time? Does that lengthen?
Yeah, it does. And so again, that you see you can adjust that roller a little bit. So that's just something we have to keep an eye on. And if it gets like off center, then the belt is shifting. So we just maintain it.
So it's the same issues that $600 treadmills have.
It's a regular treadmill, it just has sensors in it.
Gotcha.
Okay.
But we could also tell when it needed to be adjusted or calibrated because the data would be off. So, and that was pretty quickly. And what it was doing was it creates, when you run on this, the pressure sensor, it's a butterfly pattern. So it's really unique how you transfer from left to right. And that butterfly itself, I think, you're asking great questions, and I'm going to be able to answer most of them. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's a very nice treadmill to run on. The other issue we had is we had to make sure we would allow some people to train on it. And then we realized it was such a delicate device that we just did it for testing. So that it was just breaking down too quickly.
I want to walk us back just a hair.
Sure.
Sean, we haven't even asked you who the heck you are, and we're already getting
Okay.
into the weeds. Maybe we should ask you who you are, Sean, and what you do. Before I ask all these nuanced questions, could you
Sure.
introduce yourself briefly now that we're
Yeah.
10 minutes in?
Yeah. Sean Roach. I was I'm born in Toledo, Ohio. I grew up outside of Detroit, Michigan. Went to high school there. I attended the University of Toledo for a few years. My background was in biological anthropology. Transferred up to Central Michigan University, which had one of the top athletic training programs in the country at that time. It was a curriculum-based program. Graduated in 1987, 88 from Central Michigan with an athletic training degree. Decided at that time that wasn't enough of a degree. And back in the 80s, it was very, very challenging to get into a physical therapy program. There were very few programs in the country. I ended up going in at the University of Michigan in 1990. It was a 3-year master's degree program. Finished the master's degree in physical therapy, decided the day I graduated, I didn't want to do that either. So then I applied for a PhD program at the University of Michigan in biological anthropology, trying to go back. That program didn't work out for me at the time. So then my wife and I at the time, we moved out to Port Angeles, Washington in the Olympic Peninsula, which is about 2 or 3 hours west of Seattle. Worked in a physical therapy clinic where there were, I think, 18 employees. I was the only male. So the physical therapy field is primarily women. While I was there, I told them I was just going to work for a few years and then get out of the profession. And this is kind of my turning point. All of these women had been taking continuing education at a place, Edmonds, Washington, above Seattle. It was called the URSA Foundation. And it was run by Dr. Lauren Rex, who was known as Bear. He was a world-renowned osteopathic physician, a tremendously influential, probably one of the most influential people in my entire life. I took a course from him called Muscle Energy. It's just a manual therapy technique for a weekend. I left that weekend beyond confused. I was an athletic trainer. I was a physical therapist. If you had asked me how to treat a runner, I would have given them some stretches. I would have given them some strengthening exercises. But my world was open to the osteopathic philosophy is that structure before function. And so I started learning a lot of manual therapy techniques. And so let's say before I had taken courses from Bear, as he became known, and he's since passed here in the past few years, I would have, if you would have came into me with a knee pain, I would have just probably treated the knee, a patellofemoral pain. But then now I started looking at the pelvis. I started looking at the neck. I started looking at the interconnection between the body. So I took that course from Bear, became very intrigued. And over the next 5 years, I probably took an average of 18 to 22 weekend courses from osteopathic physicians around the entire country and the world. Thought about going back to osteopathic medical school, got talked out of it, decided to do a PhD program at Rocky Mountain University, which is in Provo, Utah.
But you already had a PhD.
Yeah. What's
You
that?
You already had a PhD at that
No, I had
point.
a master's in physical therapy at that time. And so I had my bachelor's degree in sports medicine as an athletic trainer. Then I did my master's degree in physical therapy at the University of Michigan. Then I went and did my PhD at Rocky Mountain University, healthcare professions. And my PhD was on patellofemoral pain. I was being strongly influenced by that time. There's a gentleman, Chris Powers, who's the head of the biokinesiology department at the University of Southern California. Very, very, very tremendous mentor, teacher, friend. He's probably published over 1,200 articles on knee running mechanics, foot mechanics. He's tremendously influential. He should be more recognized. So his work was showing at the time that if you had knee pain, particularly as a runner, that you should be focused more on the hip and less on the foot and ankle. So prior to Chris's work, most people were saying, well, if we just put orthotics or change the shoe wear, when the foot hits the ground, if it hits it more appropriately, it'll change the mechanics into the knee. Chris was saying at that time in the 90s, he said, listen, we've done a ton of research in this area. It doesn't seem like that's making a difference with this anterior knee or patellofemoral pain. So he was focused on the hip mobility, hip strength. My dissertation went a little beyond that because of the influence of the osteopaths. I started looking at the muscle, it's called the quadratus lumborum. It's a muscle that connects the ribs, the end of the rib cage to the pelvis. When that muscle is aggravated or irritated or has a trigger point, what it will do is it will neurologically, it will inhibit the gluteal muscles. So let's say you have a typical runner come in and you just do hip strengthening. Well, if right above the hips, that muscle's aggravated, it won't allow the gluteal muscles to activate. So you have to kind of go up the chain. So my research was focused on, do people with patellofemoral pain tend to have more trigger points in their quadratus lumborum than those without knee pain? And we found a pretty significant difference. So if you came in with knee pain, it was over 90% of the time you would have a trigger point or a hyper irritable spot within the middle of the quadratus lumborum muscle. And so that's kind of what my whole focus was, trying to just get clinicians to start thinking, not just the knee, not just the ankle foot, not just the hip. We need to consider the whole body. So I did my PhD work on that, published several articles. And in the last few years, the focus has been, about 3 years ago, I just finished a Master of Science degree in Philosophy of Science and Religion from the University of Edinburgh, looking at motor control strategies and cognitive function. So that's kind of where I'm at now, and I'm about ready to turn 60. And I think I'm going to spend the next 20 years is going to be on heavily on clinical research, especially with aging process, how to keep people healthy. And running is certainly within that realm. I think we can keep people running healthy a lot longer if we apply some different strategies or conceptual models. So kind of where I'm at now. And then on a quick aside is I've not been running much in the last few years myself. In fact, I haven't been running at all. I got very much into powerlifting. So in the last 3 to 4 years, I've been ranked in the top 4 or 5 in the world across all federations for my age group and weight. So I'm hoping in the fall, I should have a good chance of breaking a number of world records for squat and bench and stuff like that. And running just tends to aggravate that as you get older. You guys are young, so you'll figure that out. It's you kind of have to make some choices, some trade-offs. But I'm very, very interested in getting back into trail running in particular. So that's kind of where I'm at in a nutshell. Super focused on answering some questions. And running is really fascinating in that there's a lot of fascinating things about running. It's one of the few activities where you would do on a daily basis, whereas I wouldn't bench press every day. But I think it's historically, or it's traditionally, that's what you do, is you run on a daily basis. You don't take, I think maybe runners would benefit from a little more breaks. I think traditionally runners, when I worked with them initially, the Nike runners were very big into heavy weightlifting to a degree, not powerlifting, but they were very strong. Whereas most of your regular runners have a distaste or a skepticism about putting weight resistive training into their routine because they think they're going to gain weight. That's usually the reason. I don't want to get big. And I always laugh. I'm like, you're not going to get big. That's not.
You have no idea how much work it takes to get big.
Yeah.
Hey, we subscribe to the strength side.
Yeah,
of
there you
things
go.
here,
Okay.
Sean. Don't
Kirk.
you worry.
Do you see A, why I wanted to have this conversation, and B,
Yeah.
why it's going to be hard to have just one episode here? Because there are
Yes.
several
So-
directions we could go here.
Okay.
Yes, Brad. You're like throwing meat to a pack of hungry dogs, and I have 30 directions I could go with my question asking. You're the same way, Brakken. I'm like, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
because
yeah.
he lays these little, he'll say something and then dangle something else that is fully worth an entire episode of conversation, and then move to the next. It's where we start. I don't even care. I want to explore it though.
Okay.
Well,
so
first
where
of all, I want let's just stroke your ego for a second, Sean, and then we got quit. How much weight do you have to lift as a 59-year-old man to be what's your age class or your weight class, and then how much weight do you throw around? I'm curious.
Right now, there's of the 18 state records in Oregon, I have 17 of them at 165, 181, another weight class in different organizations. So right now, at 165, my top squat was 430, bench is 303, deadlifts at 463. So those are all done the same day. There's a lot of strategy involved in those. So I'm hoping, and I'm going to put it out there to put more pressure on myself. I'm hoping in the fall for at 165, hopefully a 452 or better squat, probably a 315 bench, and I'm hoping for like a 480 plus deadlift. So that's kind of where my goals are, what I've been training for. So it's just a lot of strategy, that, and if you've ever done much powerlifting, and I in USPA, which is very rigorous, the squat throw determines your whole day. They're very, very serious about squat depth at this point, much more serious than they were 5 or 6 years ago, unfortunately for me. And I'm very lean. So I missed some depth calls. Like at the World Championships a year ago, I opened up at 402, had to repeat it a couple times, threw the whole day off because my depth was probably less than a half an inch off, according to the side judges. So if you miss the squat in the beginning, I kind of just blow the rest of my day up. I'm not really concerned because now I'm so far off the total that I can't. So I'm hoping for like a 1230 total in this coming up fall. So that's very respectable for my age and for my class. So
Is this raw
yeah,
or are these with squat suits?
raw.
Raw.
Everything's raw. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize I started about 3 years ago with powerlifting. I have a coach here, Dean Munsey, who when he was competing, he squatted about 850, 860. And so he's my age. Yeah, there's a lot. There's just so much nuance as you get more into. So I'm listed at the international elite level. That's the top level you can get to. So I think when I go to the meets, it's all about strategizing, trying to figure out, okay, it's like playing a chess game. Where do you want to open up? Where do you want to go next? I think if I wasn't very good at it, I'd probably have more fun. I don't have fun at these meets. They're all very stressful. And it's all I just compete within myself. But I also do it for another reason I do this is to try and encourage other people as I get older that they can still stay very, very strong. We have a 98-year-old that trains here at our facility. She's a female, and she's won the last 3 world titles at age 95, 96, and 97 for deadlifts. And she lives independently and she drives. And through her, we have 5 other women in their 80s that come in and train with her every Tuesday and Thursday.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, and the quick and that's kind of where I want to push this. So when I work with 40-year-old men, they're like, well, I can't squat and deadlift. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm almost 60. And a little bit of background here, about 10 years ago, I couldn't even lift a bar. I had been trail running about 15 years ago, and trail running in Bend, I had a dog jump me when I was running up a hill. It came over I didn't see it, hit me in the chest. I fell backwards. I ended up fracturing 3 vertebrae in my low back and fractured a cartilage in my spine. And so I had to have emergency surgery, and I lost all function in my calf. I spent probably 4 years where I was down to about 140 pounds. Normally I weigh about 175 now. I thought my life was over. And then I started working with the Olympic lifting coaches down in San Francisco and started working with some other biomechanists, and I kind of retrained my whole body. So it's been an incredibly painful journey. I never, ever, ever anticipated I'd be powerlifting. I owe a lot to Dean Munsey, who coaches with me now about 3.5 years ago. I mean, it makes me emotional because, yeah, without him, I haven't had a coach since I wrestled in college. I wrestled some in college, but not very much because in the sports medicine program, you have to devote all your time to the other athletes for the hours that were required. But yeah, Dean's been incredibly powerful, encouraging. Whatever he says is what I do. He dictates pretty much everything. All of my workouts during the week, he watches every single repetition of every set I do on bench, squat, and deadlift. I don't do any accessory work for the most part because from a motor control strategy, those are the only lifts I need to do. I'll vary my weights and the speed, but that's about it. It doesn't make any sense to do more than that. There is a very popular, probably the strongest guy in the world right now, John Hack. Have you guys heard of him? He's worth looking at. He's out of Wisconsin. He's a 198 pounder. He's about 32 years old. He's the strongest pound per pound lifter in the history of powerlifting. And he doesn't do any accessory work either. So I think, that's worth consideration, especially like when we look at running. What do we really need to do? Do we need to be doing all of these one-legged exercises? you'll find with me when in these discussions is I really, really, really hate one-legged exercises, but that's my bias. I recognize it. There's a place for it at times, but my bias is that if you're not strong on two legs, what the heck are we doing on one leg? But again, there's a time and a place for everything. I think we just really have to individualize those programs per individual. So,
Do you want to start right there, Kirk?
Yeah, I asked the last question. You start where you would like, Brakken.
All right. So I want to explore that because running is, and we talk about it on here a fair amount. In our opinion, running is behind the other endurance sports. Cycling is light years ahead in terms of how they use technology and data and metrics to streamline science-based training. I think swimming's ahead. I think the Nordic sports are ahead in understanding exactly what is required on a daily, weekly, monthly training cycle. And runners do a lot of voodoo.
yes.
And so I want to start right here. You said early on, you said runners could handle, and we would agree with this, more days away from running. And now you're also pairing that with a potentially confusing statement that runners need less accessory work. And
Well,
I'd like to
yeah, let me
explore
clarify
both of
that.
those
It'd
too.
be like, yeah, go ahead.
I want to get into both of those. And I think let's
Yeah.
start with the quote unquote accessory work. What do runners actually need in your opinion and why? And then we can get to frequency of running, but let's start with the supplemental work.
Okay,
What do
so I'd like
runners
to,
need and what do they not?
I think every person and every athlete, and this kind of was driven home. I had a strong, I would say my experience with running coming out of Michigan is running is not a very popular. Lots of people run, and I haven't lived there since the 1990s, but it's not a very popular sport. Mostly, I think because in the spring it's usually rainy and cold and so forth. Certainly not. It's not the sport that it was historically on the West Coast. So how would I would so I'd say all athletes need to be. They have to be foundationally strong. But so here's where I got myself a little sidetracked in my head. I was amazed when I worked with the Nike runners. My bias had always been that runners are very weak and then they're not very strong. And then I worked with all the 800-meter guys. I'm like, wow, they were exceptionally strong, especially at the Olympic lifts. I was stunned.
You
They
had
were
guys
coming
like
into our-
Charles Jock there at the time, right? People like that.
Yeah, who was I'm trying to think in 2008, 2012. It's about a 3 to 4 year period where I was working with these guys. I'm trying to remember one of the guys fell across the line at the Olympic trials. He took third. He made the Olympic. Andrew Weeding was one of them.
Weeding.
I didn't work with him as often. So there was a whole number of these guys, and I worked with a set number of them. I was amazed at how strong they were at their core. And they did a lot of squats, they did a lot of Olympic lifts. So I'm like, okay, these are the guys that are successful. And I think that's what you have to look at. So within any group, who are the people that are successful and what are they doing? So at the very top, and there was a difference between tier 1, 2, 3. You'd have your gold, silver, and bronze is how the Olympic runners or Nike runners were classified. Your gold were the guys that would make the Olympic team in place. The silver were the guys that could make the Olympic trials. And the bronze were the guys that were good training partners. And the difference was crazy between the silver and the gold. I can almost always tell the sub-elite versus the elite runners. The elite
I want to
runners were
interject.
exceptionally
Sorry, really quick, just interject to the question. You were focusing on 800-meter runners. Most of our listeners are very well versed in the distances and track, but most of them, let's say, the shortest they'll race is a 5K and up in adult
Yes.
life, right? Did you see the same thing bleed into the longer distance professional athletes as far as being exceptionally strong in that focus, or was there like a tipping point where like 1500 and on or something?
Good question. I mean, I also had access, and I worked with Dathan Ritzenheim quite a bit. So Dathan was on several Olympic teams for Olympic running. Very different builds. The 800-meter guys were and women were very stout and very, very strong all the way around. I think they probably had the best build of all the runners. You get the more long distance runners, smaller, lighter weight. I work with a number of Kenyans athletes. They were very light. The ones from Kenya that Nike was representing, they were fascinating. And then, then you get into, we'll jump around a little bit here. I did work with a lot of ultra marathoners that do the trail running over in Eugene. They tended to be more about my size, about 170, 175. they were very strong as well. I think where you see the lack of strength is really more in the marathon runner, the more elite. They tend to be a little bit smaller, lighter weight. They'll do some light training, but they certainly don't lift very heavy. And at least in the past, I'll find out now, it was always this concern that if they were lifting heavy weights, that they would get big, it would put on weight, and they would become slower. And obviously that's a fallacy, but I appreciate their belief systems. So yeah, I think all athletes that are at the top of their game are foundationally very strong. I think that they all need to be able to squat. Do they need to squat like power lifters? No, but they need to be able to squat on two legs. They need to be strong through their core. And I think bench they could say, well, why would I bench? Well, because the shoulder girdle, the body is an integrated whole. It doesn't make any sense to just strengthen part of it. It all communicates with one another. So I think there's benefit, again, not into heavy powerlifting training, but staying maybe 6 to 8 reps with a weight that you can do 6 to 8 times would be appropriate even for a runner. And then deadlifts, I think, if you had one exercise to do for all athletes, it would be deadlifting, because that's the only muscle that actively recruits the gluteus maximus muscle. And so again, when you would, and we can get into, this word core training. I don't believe there is a core. In fact, there's a really interesting article you guys could Google. It's probably free. I think it's called the core myth stability, or the core stability myth. I think they looked at a study where it's like maybe I'm going to be a little bit off on this, about 900 women that were pregnant that had low back pain. When you become pregnant, over a short period of time, all of your quote trunk muscles will turn on for the most part, your obliques, your abdominal muscles, to allow for the stomach to get bigger, to allow for the baby to grow. So when they started this study, the relationship is usually the thought process is that, well, these women have low back pain because their core muscles are turned off and not stabilizing their trunk and their low back. After most of these women had a baby within 2 to 3 weeks or shorter, again, I'm a little short on details. I haven't read the study in a while. The majority of the women, low back pain resolved after the delivery, but the core muscles don't turn back on in general for another 8 to 10 weeks. So it's something to consider when we think, well, what's the most important muscle to train? As well, your obliques and let's do a lot of planks and those things are important. But I would say my research would bear out, and Chris Powers and others, probably for the runner, the gluteus maximus, the gluteus medius and minimus might be the most essential muscles to train for many different reasons. But the core would be the gluteus maximus muscle's primary function is to keep the trunk in an upright position. Watts don't do that. I've got people that have squatted 800, 900 pounds in my facility with force plates, video capture analysis, and electromyography, and will get minimal to no gluteal function, glute maximus function, which is amazing. I mean, these guys are squatting, below 90 degrees. They're world champion power lifters. But if I put the electromyography on those glutes and I have them deadlift, you'll see the gluteus maximus electrical signals go through the roof. So that's probably if the person's capable and they've got some good coaching, and there's a lot of great coaching online and on YouTube, the deadlift is probably the most crucial. So if you had a runner that says, hey, I've got a half hour once a week or twice a week, what could I do? It probably would be deadlifts if you wanted to pick one exercise. And it trains the entire body as well. So
I think you're on mute, Brakken. You pro.
Oh man, I blew my nose before and I muted it. Unreal. Now we're back. So, okay, question on that. Deadlifting, in our experience, is one of probably the 2 toughest things to teach the classic distance runner how to do and how to do properly. And also, many of them don't have access to bumper plates, which will set the depth. So for you, in all the things that you just said, where does depth and bar type fall into this? Are you seeing the same type of recruitment and benefit from, say, a trap bar or from a higher start and finish deadlift? In terms of a runner's access to this, let's say they don't have the ability to get down low, or they have a trap bar, so it's safer for them up front. Do you see the same type of benefit, or does this need to be bumper plated, straight bar deadlift?
I would go without, and again, I'm going to be very careful being a research person, trying to be legitimate here. The best way to answer that, you'd have to look at each individual. I mean, ideally,
Mhm.
and look at how their body functions. But I would say, at least hypothetically, I'm not going to use the word theory very often here, but hypothetically, no, I don't think it matters. I think the key, you could use any bar you want. And in fact, I discourage most people from doing the traditional deadlift if they're not doing competitive activity. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Um, but yeah, the trap bar I think is absolutely fine. I think you
Okay.
could use bands. You could use dumbbells. It doesn't matter what you do. It's more the activity where you're getting in the position to deadlift and
Mhm.
that you're bringing your trunk into an upright position. Because what you'll find with really good deadlifting, there's minimal to no motion anywhere, but except where the trunk is extending back. I'm not doing a squat.
Mhm.
You know, I'm pretty much set. I do a sumo deadlift, so I'm pretty much set in. I bend over, I lock up, and all the motion is my trunk going into an upright position with my chest right. But I could easily do that with a dumbbell. I could easily do that with bands. So
Mhm.
it's just taking the concept and applying it. So I would say if I wanted to be really scientific, I'd have to put the electromyography units on the glutes. And that's also not accessible very often, the EMG. So the best you can do is you could at least have somebody put their hand back on your glutes and see if at least that area is tightening up. But it would be pretty hard to do a decent deadlift without any glute activation. You could substitute other muscles. So I would say with the runners out there, I would just find some really like Elite Lift. That's a website with Dave Tate. I think they promote some very heavy, serious pro lifters, but they got a lot of really, really good information on there. And a lot of their information on YouTube is time stamped. So you can at least look at the technique. So I don't think it matters if you're not competing in deadlift, I think you could use any type of bar. It's more that you're doing the activity correctly, the motion correctly.
And you have to go heavy enough to force that engagement that you're looking for.
Yeah, and here's the other thing as far as you could do that, this goes back to Arnold Schwarzenegger and a lot of the bodybuilders in the 1970s. You don't have to have weights, you don't have to have bands. If you know how to simulate it yourself with those contractions. So if you only had a light dumbbell, I can pretend that it's heavier. I can act as if it's heavier. And what I can do is just actively isometrically and and isotonically contract those muscles. I can simulate that. It's harder to do that for most people. You can do a tremendous amount with all the bands, and those are relatively inexpensive. And again, there's just so much YouTube content out there that's free and that's really good. It's very, very hard to also screw yourself up with deadlifts. But I'd say it is. I don't. I see very few. Here's one way to look at this from a logical, common sense perspective. Go into any high school any day after school, and you would just shudder at how bad the form is, and yet very few of those kids get injured. I
Yeah.
think if anything, you'd see more injuries with the stuff they're doing on squats when they're going very heavy with the compression loads. But with deadlifts, you can get away with a lot of bad form. But with a runner that just wanted to work on gluteal activation and getting stronger, again, bands would be sufficient if you found a way to do it at home. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Question
that
for you
is, I
about
would, I would say though, I mean, it is amazing that most people don't understand that the primary activity for the gluteus maximus is to deadlift. Without any doubt, the literature is very, very clear. That is the best way to train the glutes.
when you. Okay, now I have two questions, so you can pick which one you want first.
Yeah.
The first one being, is the gluteus maximus heavily involved with a run stride at pace?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. So if you look at studies comparing walking and running, in normal walking, you'll get very little gluteus maximus activation. You'll get a lot on the side muscle. So the gluteus maximus, for those that don't know, it should be the largest muscle in the body in a normal, healthy individual. Now it starts to shrink considerably as we get older. That's where you see a lot of flatness in people when they get over the age of 30 and 40. Their butt gets flat, pants are falling
Mine
down.
started at 12.
Yeah, it was at 12. Yeah, so it's genetic. like a genetic component.
You got
for
a
sure.
great butt, Brakken. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but with running, you definitely get more gluteal activation. And again, here's a challenge with the surface electromyography, is that it's really hard. There's many different forms of contractions. Most people should be familiar with an isometric contraction where you just tighten the muscles up and don't move the joint. Then there's something called isotonic, which is normal. Then there's isolytic, there's isokinetic. There's many different forms. So the electromyography is a little bit limited. It just tells you, is the muscle active? It doesn't tell you necessarily if the muscle's strong. What I would say though, to finish up with the walking and running with the glutes, let's say you were injured as a runner, but you wanted to activate the glutes. One thing you can do is if you walk on a treadmill at an incline, as the trunk starts to lean forward, you'll get more and more glute activation. So in normal walking, minimal glute activation unless you're inclined. In running, you should see the glutes activated.
Okay. Yeah, my butt has grown notably since the inclined treadmill found its way into my house, and I've done 30% work. My question, I wanted to ask about the lower back and deadlifting though, before we move on from that. And that is, historically, let's say there's athletes, and I think I would include myself in this. And I also would say, I've had my own personal training business for the last 15 years. I'm a run coach, pretty well versed in the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
And still, now I'm running 50 to 60 miles a week, of course, and doing my strength work. But if I put a heavy deadlift focus with progression, let's say I'm doing anywhere between heavy sets of 3 to 8, it doesn't even really matter. But if I follow progression with purpose, maybe leaving 1 rep in the tank, right, when I complete my sets, eventually my low back just likes to grab on me, and it can make my running feel a little less efficient because I feel like I'm stuck there in that lower back. I get a tightness that doesn't want to alleviate. And I look at myself and I film myself and I say, I don't know what I would fix, but I feel a negative impact on my biomechanics and gait. Once I piss it off, it sort of stays that way, unless I remove the movement. And I think I'm not alone there, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And so, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's one of the reasons I've not run in the last 3 years, because it's a trade-off for me. It's like I'm at a level where I can do some things some very positive things at the world level. So if I'm concerned that if I put the running back in with the heavy lifting, they don't tend for me to work very well. However, what I would say, in Oregon's one of the very few states where we're not allowed to do something called dry needling right now. My master's degree is on trigger point, or my doctoral dissertation's on trigger point. What tends to happen is when most people say low back pain, what they really are referring to is the sacral region or the pelvic region. Is that where you're getting tight? That area down right over behind the back?
Be very low, correct.
Yeah. And so there's a group of muscles that are called the multifidi, and they go from each segment to segment to segment, throughout from the upper cervical all the way down to the sacrum. And they sit within cylinders on the left and the right side. So I think what happens is we create a little bit of a compartment syndrome when we do both the running and we do the lifting together. So I think that combination builds up a little bit of extra fluid or decreased blood flow in that region. And then as the decreased blood flow leads to less oxygen, the tissue becomes chemically acidic, and it sets off a lot of what we would call nociceptors or pain receptors and mechanoreceptors. So I think if you live in a state where you have access to practitioners that can do dry needling in that region, it can be very beneficial in getting those muscles to loosen up, increase blood flow. And then I think you could more successfully combine those two techniques. But that would be my hypothesis and the gluteus maximus muscle itself, the gluteus maximus is divided anatomically into an upper compartment, the upper 1/3, and the lower 2/3 are neurologically a little bit distinct. This upper 1/3, when it's aggravated, let's say it gets fatigued, what it will tend to do is it become hyper irritable. It also refers into the low back. So that would be an area that somebody, let's say you didn't have access to dry needling, then what I would do is use a tennis ball. I like a tennis ball better than like a lacrosse ball, and get into those regions of the gluteus minimus, medius, gluteus maximus and roll those out before and after your lifting and your runs for about 30 seconds to a minute. So that can make a tremendous positive influence. Again, I'm going to experiment with this stuff this summer when I get back into trail running. I'm kind of going to be towing a fine line here, but I'm going to make sure I roll that area out with I like a tennis ball better than a roller because it's a smaller surface area. And a trigger point is not the band in the tissue. A trigger point is felt to believe that it's a muscle fiber, which is the size of a hair. It's a group of muscle fibers that have contracted themselves. And when they contract themselves at the cellular level, you can see this on imaging. It crushes the capillaries, which deliver the oxygen. So when you find all these hyper irritable spots, like if you rolled on a tennis ball, you may feel it refer down your leg or feel that refer into your low back. That's not a nerve sensation. It's a myofascial. It's a distinctive different sensory input. But if your body perceives that something's wrong with that area, it'll just tend to tighten the area up even more. So there's a lot of unknowns with trigger points. In fact, there's a lot of unknowns with most of the things that we do. But I think you see a tremendous number of trigger points, soft tissue dysfunction in runners more than you would other athletes. I don't know that for sure, but I'm just betting because of the overuse and overtraining and the one-legged demands. So I would kind of come back to summarize. I think you could successfully combine moderately heavy lifting, deadlifting into your running routine as long as you were using rolling out, or if you had access to somebody that does dry needling, it'd be a good intervention.
Okay. Then I think that partially answers the question that it begs, which is if one of the best things for runners is heavy deadlifting, and heavy deadlifting is preventing some of the run volume you'd like to hit, what is that effective dosage level that you would like to see from a runner so that you're getting that glute activation and strengthening that you want without risking the running volume that distance runners inherently crave?
So what I would say, if let's say you're going to use a barbell, or let's say you're going to use a trap bar, I like to keep things very simple. It might not seem like that, but in practical with patients and athletes, I would probably find a way. Let's say that hypothetically I don't think you need to do this, but let's say you could do a 1 repetition maximum of, let's say for a runner, 300. So what I would do is take half of that weight, 50, I would go from 300 to 150, maybe a little bit more, maybe up to 60%. And I'd be doing 5 sets of 5, really concentrating on form. I would put that in, and you could put that into your running days as well. You could do that, and you could do your deadlifts and then do your running in the evening,
So
or
you're
vice
getting
versa.
that type of recruitment at 50 to 60%.
You could get some pretty good recruitment, especially if you're focused on the form. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's again, if you're using sloppy form, no. But if you're going to go use like a slow speed where you're really focused on the proper hip hinging, and you're not using it as a squat deadlift, but you're using it as a deadlift, absolutely. And it takes a long time. You know, one of the things I was a little frustrated with 3 years ago, I started benching within these meets. I remember the first meet I benched, a lot of the older guys came up and said, "Hey, you're really strong, but you need to learn how to bench." And I never take offense to people that are mentors. I'm like, "What do you mean?" They said, "Your form is terrible. Looks like a bodybuilder. My arms were out to the sides, what we call flaring." I said, "Well, how long do you think it will take me to get to the level where I can be very proficient?" They said 5 years. And so 3 years in, I remember last year, I was about ready to just throw the proper form out. I just could not figure out. Part of it was learning. This is counterintuitive. Learning how to use your lats, your latissimus dorsi muscles, really pulling down. I'm like, well, the lats, what do they have to do with bench? A lot. They have to do a lot with squatting. They have a lot to do with deadlifts. So yeah, I think if a runner learned how to actually recruit their lats, learn how to stay good form, tighten up their trunk, and then work on it, they could focus more on that hip hinge, they would get some tremendously good benefits. So they wouldn't have to go, and 5 sets of 5, that's it. I don't think you need to do more than that. You get a lot. And then what you could do is incrementally each week or every couple of weeks, you could add about 5 more, 2.5 to 5 more pounds on there, and you progressively overload the area. And you'll know when you hit your peak. there's going to be a point at which you really can't go much heavier. So not like you go on forever. But the weaker you are, the more fun it is because every week you get better.
Right.
And then you think that you've missed your calling and that you really should have been a power lifter when that's not true. So, yeah, like I was talking about John Hack. John Hack is a 198 pounder. He squats over 900, deadlifts over 900, and his bench is close to 700. So you just need to be real on those things.
I want to ask you a question that is almost unfair to ask of you, but I'm gonna ask it anyways. I'm gonna make a lot of generalizations here. I'm gonna give you an athlete prototype, and I'm gonna ask you what to do with this athlete on the strength front.
And I want to preface it by I love generalizations, so go right ahead.
Okay. Let's say our average listener runs 30 to 50 miles a week, and they are racing, whether it's the road or the trails, anywhere between 5K and marathon distances. Let's just say, I mean, a lot of our listeners run more than 50 miles a week, a lot run less than 20, but you have a 5K to marathoner, any type of terrain, running 5 days a week or whatever it is. Knowing nothing about this athlete, if you were to design like a very broad stroke strength program saying, I believe this will help this athlete, whether it's with injury prevention, longevity in sport, combating age, I'm 41, Brakken's 37, or just performance, what kind of strength regimen might you just slap at this runner without knowing anything else about them?
How much time do they have to train with weightlifting?
Well, let's say they can devote at least 2 sessions of an hour a week.
Oh, that's fantastic. I would keep it very, very simple. And again, this is stuff I know these people, but they're not personal friends. There's a guy, Mark Ripito, it's called Starting Strength. Very popular, very opinionated person, really does not like physical therapists and goes out of his way to let everybody know that.
Brakken, haven't you followed a program of his?
Yeah,
What's that?
I
Yeah.
preach Ripito. I don't think we get along, but I
Yeah,
like his stuff.
He's much more personable. He's just a very gruff person, but he's much more personable with my staff when they met him in person.
Okay.
But I love that program. And they also have like a silver starting strength for people that are much older. But if I had, and we're talking about, does this person have access to a gym
They have access to everything. They have a commercial gym.
I would design a program. I would do squats, deadlift, and then carries. But if I had a little more time, then I would also throw in bench press because I think it's incredibly underrated. And I think it's crucial for the overall. I look at the body as an integrated whole. It doesn't make any sense how you think you could ignore any region of the body and that it would stay strong. Yeah, and I'm huge on carries. I think that it doesn't make any sense if you follow Stuart McGill in his work. He's another researcher up in Canada that's been very influential on the internet and so forth, and recognizably so. I think carries are one of the things that can strengthen the quote core muscles isometrically. And it also does a lot for the quadratus lumborum muscle. And carries would be, you can do it with anything. You could carry barbell, you could carry dumbbell. I prefer that people carry 2 dumbbells if they've had any hints of chronic low back issues. But if they were to do 1, which is called a suitcase carry, what that does, let's say you grab a 60-pound dumbbell in one hand, what does the body want to do? It wants to lean toward the side of the weight. So the other side this whole trunk has to contract. And there's several layers of that trunk that co-contract. So you can't isolate them. That is the single best way to strengthen this midline structure.
What do you like for durations and rep schemes for a carry? How do you like to program?
I usually will have them walk out. Let's say if I have 2 dumbbells, let's say I do 90, 100-pound dumbbells. I'll take about 10 to 12 steps out and then I turn around slowly and I walk slow and I go heel toe. So I really focus on tightening up in my trunk as much as I can and keep my shoulders down and back. So basically I'm creating a giant isometric contraction through my whole body. And that's another thing I would say, all of these activities I'd have this runner doing would be the squat, the deadlifts, and the carries. Everything would be hyper focused on no movement within this trunk. And that's where you get into, in physical therapy, we used to go back with children with cerebral palsy, is they don't have very good trunk stability. So we would say, well, you got to have the foundation, this core, the body has to be strong for the arms and legs to move off of it. So if we got a very tight trunk, which it should be for the most part, there should be very little wiggle room, then the arms and the legs can move efficiently. What I want to go back to also with the training, if I had 2 days a week, that's more than enough. But you can make a very strong case that if personally had 1 day a week of lifting is tremendously beneficial. And where you get into some of the studies, these are older studies looking at senior citizens where there's not a lot of funding. Let's say I had a limited amount of funding to go out to the nursing home to work with people. They did research where you looked at 1 day a week, 2 days a week, or 3 days a week. Which group got better? Well, the group that did 1 day a week, these are old studies, 70%, they got 70% of the strength that the people did that did 3 days a week. So let's say you have a busy week and you're like, oh, I only have 2 days I can train this week. I only got one, I won't get any benefit. 100% no, absolutely not. Because really what you're doing is, you're not doing this strength training for hypertrophy or making the muscle stronger. What you're doing it is for neuromuscular control. So again, if you can learn if your body can start to unconsciously understand how much it needs to stabilize itself when you're running, then you don't end up with the arms and the leg issues in particular that you see with runners. A lot of that running injuries, whether it's the foot, it's the knee or the hip or the low back, they're all the same mechanism. It's the inability to control excessive motion for the most part. I mean, that'd be so. Yeah, I like your person 1 day, 2 days a week for an hour. I also would preface it by saying if you're doing 5 sets of 5, usually it's going to be 75 to 80% of your maximum strength, and you can just guesstimate that. You don't have to get on the bench or squat. I don't think that's an ideal way to do it. You can kind of figure it out. Again, you're not competing, so it doesn't matter in weightlifting. But I'm actually in the middle of also I want to start an institute for successful aging, which is one of the reasons I'm going back over to Eugene, because I think I have a population over there. We could do a lot more research with people in their 60s and 70s that would participate, and then we could try to make that model across the country. But heavy weight or moderately heavy weightlifting is crucial.
By the way, question, just to make sure I have a couple things. What is your time frame today to chat? When do you have to be finished up by?
I'm fine. I left myself open for a while, so
Okay.
I'm good.
And then just to confirm, with the farmer's carry, you're talking about suitcase carry would be preference unless you have some potential overuse injury or something in the lower back. You'd prefer a suitcase over like a traditional farmer's carry?
I prefer so farmers would be, I would say 2, and then suitcase would be carrying 1. I like I prefer the farmer's carry, and anybody that's had any chronic instability in the low back. I find myself, just kind of my own bias, if I'm carrying them on one side, it tends to really aggravate my low back over time. So I think just working with 2, and again, the focus is heel to toe. Doesn't make any sense to me to walk fast because that's not my goal. My goal is to keep all of my core trunk muscle under an isometric contraction. Now, I want to also preface that if for people listening, I know that ideally that you don't want to hold isometrics for more than 8 to 10 seconds, but that's just nuance for me. I mean, the goal here is for you to learn to walk with these 2 weights, keep muscles in a tight position. It's motor control strategies. So it's not the ideal, science, but it is what it is.
And you would say, I haven't heard you say bicep curls or shoulder lat raises or tricep push downs. Is all that when it comes to performance? Let's talk running biomechanics. Is that all a waste of time? Honestly, I mean, really, when it comes down to it, the percentage of benefit, would you say is negligible compared to everything else you're talking about?
100% for runners. Doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense because especially if you were to add in bench press, you're going to get the majority of those. If I had a limited time, no, it's going to be hip, it's going to be trunk, it's going to be strengthening the lower legs. Absolutely. Yeah, that's all. I think if you were an Olympic lifter doing that type of stuff, I think one of the things that can be overlooked is people will think that doing bicep curls is not important. It's a bodybuilding exercise. That's not true. A lot of them, you get a number of Olympic lifters and CrossFitters that do Olympic lifting that end up with shoulder issues. It's because they don't have strong biceps. And the biceps, if you look at the anatomy, do help stabilize and flex the shoulder. But again, that's another group. But yeah, if I had limited time, I'm doing core, I'm doing trunk, and I am doing hip stability.
Kirk, do you have a direction you want to take this?
Yep, but you take it where you want to.
All right,
You're gonna pivot, weren't you?
No, that his last statement led me back to something I right away thought, which is we agree that trunk area can kind of just control the athlete. That strong trunk area is mandatory for almost any sport. But there is so much in the running world that focuses ankle and below. So you said that you'd rather look up than down the chain. We're on board with that. But is there a place, and what does it look like for ankle and feet to address that in the weight room, in the practice facility, other than while you're running?
Well, I go by the saying proximal stability before distal mobility. That's a famous. Have you guys heard that saying? So proximal would be, it's the same with shoulders, same with the leg. If I had some extra time, I think agility training is important for ankle foot. Doing agility training, doing ladders, and doing stuff for motor control strategy, but specific training, I probably wouldn't focus a lot of time. I would focus a lot. I tell you what I do focus on with foot. I'm really big on is making sure that the foot and feet are mobile. I do a lot of tennis ball motion. I do a lot of self massage, and I get in between the toes and mobilize those structures. But no, I don't see a big place for it, especially if you're doing squats. You're going to get a lot of the mobility stuff that you need, and you need really strong. I mean, you need good ankle mobility and strength for those activities. But I know a lot of the focus in the physical therapy world is always like doing eccentric toe raises and like for Achilles tendonitis. That doesn't make any sense to me at all because eccentrics is usually where you get injured. So it doesn't make sense that why we're doing the mechanism that got you injured to try and rehab. I mean, you can make a case for it. I think I can argue pretty effectively against it, but there could be certain individuals that might benefit from more ankle foot. But in general, it's not an area that I think it doesn't bear a lot of fruit for me.
So you want them flexible and dynamic, and that's enough.
Yes, especially in the hips. The hip mobility. I published 2 studies, probably a few years ago. I have a lot of data that I've not published because I'm not on any tenure track. I'm not working at a university, and it takes a lot of time to write these articles up and submit. But 2 of the studies we looked at several years ago, I had a question is a lack of hip mobility related to chronic low back pain? And we were looking at runners, weren't we? And then the separate study is a lack of hip mobility related to chronic knee pain. And what we found in both studies was there was a significant relationship between, especially a lack of hip extension and low back pain. And also what you would say, and that one would tend to make a little bit of sense, I think, from a common sense perspective. If you lack the ability to actually extend the hip, what you'll do is you'll tend to arch through your low back a little bit more, and that will aggravate like increased compressive loads on the lumbar and the sacral region. Now, where that would tie into the chronic knee pain would be is if you're constantly irritating the low back, you can make a case that you're irritating the nerves that are going down into the legs that are controlling, the hips and the legs, and you could put excessive mechanical load into the knees, the fascia, the bone, the ligaments, and so forth. So I would stress number 1 with the runner, if you had limited time, hip mobility, hip extension, and internal rotation. I actually try to de-emphasize any hamstring stretching. That one is usually very negative, the outcomes. I think people need a certain amount of stiffness in their hamstrings, and when they stretch them out, they tend to end up more injured. I would say when I worked with a lot of my elite runners, their hamstrings were fairly moderately tight. And the reason that's a good thing is because it's called elastic strain energy. When you stretch a moderately tight muscle, It's like a rubber band. You'll put a little bit on stretch, it stores energy, and then you get that recover. So when you stretch them out, it's like they don't get that recovery rate. So if you were going to stretch something in the hips in place of the hamstrings, it would be the hip adductors, the muscles on the inside. You see a lot of those on TikTok and Instagram. I'm really big on that. Power lifters, especially with deadlifting. The hip adductors, I've seen several tears in the last couple of years of competition. I tore a huge hole in the adductor 3 years ago on a deadlift. It snapped twice. I knew it was tight. I wasn't stretching it. And now I stretch it. After I also had to have PRP, platelet-rich plasma, because it wasn't rehabbing on its own. So after 2 months, I did that. But yeah, so I would say as far as ankle mobility, there's some things we can go over next time as well. I can show you some setups. Like when most people squat, they look at their ankle mobility and like, wow, I've got tight ankles, I can't squat. So they'll start stretching the ankle. But if you take that foot and you put it up on a chair, and then you have like one foot, like you're in a little bit of a lunge, and then you try and bring your knee over your foot. So you kind of just like, you'll notice that most people have the ankle mobility when you put it in that position. It's just when the whole body's loaded, it looks as if you don't have ankle mobility. That's just because of the motor control, the loading strategy. So if I'm basing my ankle stretches or dorsiflexion in particular on what they look like on a squat, that can oftentimes be misleading. And oftentimes what you're doing is overstretching the calf too much. And that can potentially lead to, these are all just potential troublemakers.
Right.
So there's some other things to consider along that lines.
Question. I said this, I don't remember, Brakken, who I asked, but it was a previous guest a while ago, and Brakken and I, we're not, let's not call it anti-stretch club, but let's just call it anti-stretch club. Okay.
Yeah.
And I've made the statement. In fact, we've had an entire podcast episode devoted to this is our opinion. Maybe it's fact, maybe it's not, but strength work is mobility work in disguise. Meaning if you're running through a full range of motion squat, the hip joint is moving, the knee joint is moving. Let's say a full range of motion Bulgarian split squat or walking lunge, and even though you're not maybe a fan, would you back that up in saying there's partial, if not mostly truth to strength work, purposeful, full range of motion strength work is indeed mobility work in disguise?
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons I was not, even though a few years ago before I tore my adductor, I thought, for me, that the tissue was already aggravated. It was if you get to a point where like I had to use an ACE wrap, 2 ACE wraps to get through a deadlift and squat exercise. I mean, my routine during the week. So I was not paying attention. I was saying, well, it's sore. I'll deal with it after the meet. So yes, in general, yeah, that's the great thing about doing deadlifts and squats appropriately is you get the mobility, the motor control, and you get the strength all in one. Absolutely. I do think, however, with running, you just have to make sure, I think it's definitely worth putting extra effort into getting those hip extensor, the hip flexor region in the front stretched out. So if you're in standing and your leg is in neutral, when you go to walk, your hips should be able to extend 10 degrees behind you. Now, when you're running, we suspect, but we don't know this for sure, you need 20 degrees of hip extension. And the way you can measure this, you can go online. There's probably a lot of it's like, how do I assess hip flexor tightness? And you'll find like the Thomas tests and so forth. Those are some good ways to look at. There's a lot of great videos out there on hip. That hip extension is crucial. It's just crucial. The internal rotation of the hip is probably important as well, but if you had to prioritize one, it would be that. And also, again, the adductors. So, but you're absolutely correct. I think you can get most of this all done with appropriate weightlifting or selectively. Mm-hmm.
So is there this is all true until a certain level of performance is needed? Like if you were to take over the US distance program right now, would any of this change what you're saying? Is this for the general pop, or can all the way to the top? Would you
all the way to the top?
So you're staying away from anything single-legged. You're not worried about those kind of things. You're using plyometric and agility work for that.
I would clarify, within I would have to assess, each one's going to be like my mentor said. I have to see the runner.
Mhm.
This is the challenge you get into doing. These are general in general. I
Right.
don't like, but I do one-legged exercises with certain individuals that they've already demonstrated good overall strength, and or they're just individuals where I need to isolate those glutes a little bit more. So I'll definitely do clamshells, one-legged lunges. I will definitely incorporate them. I should be a little more clear. I think that people go to one-legged exercises too quickly because running's a bunch of one-legged hops. And I'm like, my goodness, why do you have them doing one-legged when they can't even do it on two legs? That's my
Right.
argument. So
Gotcha.
there's always a place for all of these tools. And I might have a lot of physical therapists and running coaches out there saying, Sean's completely wrong. He does powerlifting. What does he know about running? I know a lot about running.
Mhm.
Because I've been privileged to work with runners of all ages, but I just don't see where people, it's like you need to learn to be able to crawl before you walk. So I think and I think what happens is physical therapy in general they try to distinguish themselves from other professions, and they come up with a lot of exercises that just don't make sense. And you see that in general
Mhm.
it's like if it comes down to basics, one of my favorite quotes was from Don Henley, who sings for the Eagles. And he said, the reason I'm really good at what I do is because I can sing the same song a million times. And what I've noticed working with a lot of my very elite athletes, they do pretty much the same workouts every freaking workout. They just modify the intensity and the speed. That's one of the reasons I stick with powerlifting. I agree with John Hack, who I mentioned earlier. When they ask him what he does as accessory, I think he pretty much is saying, do you want me to make something up? Because he goes, I really don't. He goes, if my friends are there, I'll do some accessory work, but I only do these things. So I think if you want to be really good at running at the end of the day, you're just going to use these weightlifting activities or resistive training, mobility as an adjunct to get you where you want to be. But if you want to be a good runner, I think most people they start running it they run with bad form, whatever ideal form is. You'd have to figure that out within the individual, but I think they don't have and I think you guys would agree, they don't start out with a good foundation. They don't want to go out and run, walk. I think people should maybe run, walk. They need to get themselves in shape. They go out and start running a mile within 2 weeks or up to 10 miles. It's like, wait a minute, you would never do that. Well, you would be limited in the weight room from doing that, right? You couldn't jump
Mhm.
that quick.
It's self-limiting.
Yeah, it's self-limiting, I think, with a lot of other activities, but I think with running is unique. Anybody can run. I think most people don't realize that there's not an ideal form to running, but there's a better way to run to be more efficient. And at the end of the day, like with this wearable that we developed, that's the whole goal, is to have an objective tool that you can look at and say, oh, okay, wait a minute, this doesn't look good. Are we saying specifically what it means? No, no, not at all. I mean, in fact, the more intellectually curious an individual is, I think the more they're going to get out of this, the device. Originally, we designed this device for weightlifting. Several years ago, I get very frustrated. Like your question, like with deadlifts, it's like that's actually a pretty hard to do with the barbell. But we talked about putting sensors on different areas of the spine, and then you would get into a good form, and your coach or you would tap your phone and set that spine in an ideal position. Same with squats. And then when you would get off form, it would buzz. And that's one of the things we want to do with this running as well. When you have too much hip sway, hopefully the sensor is going to go off. We're going to kind of preset to say, okay, we'll allow some variance of up to 5 to 10% from what your ideal form looks like, but you're going to get some feedback to say, hey, listen, I think the system's fatigued. It's time to shut it down, maybe walk a while, or, who knows? I think at the end of the day, I think I love running. I would also preface, I would kind of pull it all together and say, from an anthropological perspective, I don't think I think that we are designed to have the ability to run, but I don't think we're definitely not designed to run. And what I mean by that, let's take weightlifting. I could weightlift and I could take a month off. I'll come back. I will have lost very little strength. So what does that tell me from an evolutionary perspective? That it's crucial as a human being or the biological entity to be strong, to survive my environment. Now let's I take a month off of running. And my experience is even with 15, 16 years old, it's like, wow. I'm like, man, that conditioning. So I think we have the inherent biological ability to train to run if we need to. but it comes at a significant cost. So I think metabolically, if you're not running or doing fitness stuff, it just goes right back down to minimal energy expenditure. But there's something crucial about the strength that you would still have the ability to maintain it. So I think with running, having the ability to run means that we need to be a little more careful in our approach, and not just be so reckless in the way or careless in the way we employ our strategies. So
I think I like that explanation more than any that I've heard about
Yes.
what humans are designed to do. Like we don't need to get into it. I disagree with the whole born to run thing. I don't buy it.
no,
We weren't born to run 100-mile weeks, but we
we
can.
yeah, well, the born to run, I won't go. We can go down this later because I want to be a little more clear on this. I want to be a lot of that is questionable.
For sure.
Those people don't train. If you go back and look at, I have to find the primary researcher. The name escapes me at the moment. I think it's Stephen Levin out of Harvard. Followed up on that book, Born to Run, and went down and studied those people. Those people don't train. They have like a religious ceremony where they go for 24 hours, where it's a lot of constant running, and most of them end up with serious injuries. I think he went down and studied I want to be more clear, but it was something like he went down, asked these people what their training routines, and they just looked at him like, "What are you talking about? Why would
Right.
you run if you don't need to?" We don't. So
Well, we have this fascination with, this is going to sound elitist, so just bear with me,
no, it's fine.
with non-first world cultures or non-current generation cultures having some mystical knowledge that we don't have.
Mhm.
So we look back to our ancestors that they might have had, like the Game Changers documentary. The ancient Greeks and Romans knew something about diet that we didn't. Neanderthals knew about something about diet that we didn't. These tribesmen know something about human endurance that we don't. We look to the Kenyans and Ethiopians and be like, well, is ugali, is that thing they're eating, and milk tea, is that every day? Like that's the secret. Or this, the Maori tribe, they know something we don't. We have, there's like a mysticism to it that we could unlock something that a culture that we don't understands something that we don't. And then we apply blanket like validity to performances that we don't currently understand either. And then it becomes gospel in our world. And it's a very easy book seller, but it's not a sustainable training methodology.
I think you're 100%. There were no secrets. I think the benefit in the past, I think where we could do better, and that's what the company that we have is actually called Project Dasein. And Dasein is a word that just means it's a German word that means being there. And I think what we've lost is with all the video games that are focused on computers and so forth, we don't interact with the world enough. So I think that's where that's of anything in the past that I think that people were doing better. And it wasn't out of the fact that they were better than us. It's the fact that there wasn't the technology available to be so absorbed. So I think what running does is it allows us to be part of the world as well. And so there's a saying that, or a philosophy that the more I move about in the world, the more I know the world. And the more I move about in the world knows me. There is no world without you. If there were no human beings, there would be no world per se. Not an elitist view. It's just the world is the world is all that there is another famous saying from Ludwig Wittgenstein. But yeah, you're absolutely, I think it's absolutely, yeah, it sells books is what I would sell. And it sells ideas. But no, I don't think the Greeks were better. My goodness, even if you look back 100 years ago at the longevity and performance. And so look how people just keep getting better. I mean, it's not necessarily the technology. I think it's more the focus on recovery. And that's where, it's like recovery it's not the mindset I grew up with in the 80s where everything was influenced by Rocky, just burn yourself into the ground. And actually, I would say that it cost me dearly, that approach, when my high school was a national powerhouse back in Michigan. And my whole mindset was more like in the Rocky mode, just go, go, go. And I was always injured. I was always fatigued. My senior year in high school, we were defending state champions, and that was a disaster. I ended up in the hospital with viral meningitis. And I can tell you a big contribution to that was from overtraining. I was running probably 60, 70 miles a week before the season started, just thinking that's what's going to take to win the state championship. So no, I think we're way better. And I think if you look at like the most elite wrestling program in the country right now is Penn State. They won 11 out of 13 titles. They're about ready to win next week as well. Iowa's my favorite team, even though I went to University of Michigan. But at the top level, I think Penn State in particular, they don't overtrain. They're doing something correct. And that's why I think you'd want to look with the running community. Who are the successful runners? And then now there's going to be some genetic components, but just look, what are the general pattern? Maybe they spend more time in recovery. Maybe they're running every 2 to 3 days versus every day. I don't know. We'd have to look at that. And there's always going to be statistical outliers. There's always going to be people that can do exceptionally more volume than others. So, but my goodness, I'd like to have one person argue with me to say that every person couldn't benefit from being strong. I mean, you get weak at about the age of 40 in particular, if you're working with runners. This is a big area of research interest for me, is at the age of 40, we start to undergo sarcopenia. So sarcopenia is when the muscle cells just disappear. They don't disappear, they get broken down. So at the age of 40 to the age of 60, on average, you'll lose 1% of your muscle fibers a year. Now, if you train, will you keep them? The literature is not clear. We suspect that that's so. So at between 40 and 60, you lose 20% of your muscle fibers and you're continuing to run. Well, if the muscles aren't able to contract because there's not as many of them there, then the mechanical load would seem to go into the non-contractile tissues, which would be that outside the muscle, the fascia, the bone, the cartilage. So I'm and then after the age of 60, the sarcopenia just accelerates, and at 70, it just goes hog wild. I think that's why you start to observe people in their 70s, like your parents, they get very tiny in general. They get a lot smaller. I mean, they're drying out. There's different variables, but certainly the sarcopenia. And the muscle cells themselves, they produce molecules, which are essential for our immune system. So I think running can keep us very strong, but I think if you want to stay in the game in terms of improving your VO2 max, which is super important as we get older, you're going to have to do more work to maintain being healthy as you get older. It's not even maintaining. As you get older, you're trying to slow down the progression, which is inevitable. But I am absolutely convinced that you could age into your 80s pretty successfully with being smart in your training. I think the reason after 80 things kind of go south is because my observation is because you lose a lot of things. You lose family members, you lose jobs, stuff like that. You don't have the incentive to train as hard. So I think there is more community oriented or spiritual oriented. So, but you can still run in your 80s. I haven't seen very many, but we could have a whole new group with people like yourselves. So promoting it, but I think you have to be very smart about it.
Yeah. My last post on social media, which I don't do very often anymore, literally says, as you age, your top end fitness relies more and more heavily on having a strong structure. It's what separates men and women still crushing in their 40s to those who are slowly slipping on the running front. And I stand by that wholeheartedly. You can get away with it because your biology as a 25 to 35-year-old doesn't rely necessarily on having a strong structure. You kind of have what you have. But once it starts being pulled away from you slowly, year by year, as you age, keeping the highest percentage of that available to you is going to make you a faster runner later in life. And you'll see huge drop-offs with elite level runners. Some can extend it into their 40s and 50s very impressively. And some literally, it's like they fell off a damn cliff. Like, what is going on? And it's because the ones who keep their structure strong versus those who just say, I'm only going to run, you see that gap just start to form, and it's somewhere in that 40 plus range from what I see.
There's some real biological mechanisms at play there, and the fact that, you gotta look at, are you getting enough protein? The studies now are looking at, the best studies are showing, especially if you hit the age of 60, we might need up to 1.6 grams per pound of body weight. Because your body doesn't utilize protein as well after the age of 60. Now that's a lot of protein. You can get into the RDA and other studies that will say, well, maybe you need 0.5 to 0.6 grams per kilogram of lean body mass. I tend to lean a little bit heavier. Probably 60% plus of my diet is definitely protein. For that reason, I'm going to be 60. It's just so you have to have the material available as well. You definitely need the carbs, but you definitely need the protein. For runners, I think you just have to be, yeah, I just think there's just so many variables, right? Take into consideration, but it narrows down. I mean, are you strong enough? Do you get enough protein in your diet? You know, can look at water and all those other micronutrients, but I think you need to look at the main factors first, to your foundation. Then you move from there into the nuance.
So all of this that you've done has led you to want to design a wearable for people to be able to use without a $100,000 pressure treadmill.
Yes.
Talk me
Yes.
through that process.
So this device is designed, again, to be very economical, easy to use. There's going to be some. We're in our first stage, so hopefully, people will be kind and generous with us. A little bit patient. So this is a device that you can just go outside. You can strap on. You can obviously run on it with a treadmill as well. And what it does is it just looks at your primarily right now we're looking at your symmetry. When you run from left to right, are you fairly symmetrical from left to right, to front to back, and top to bottom? And so in a nutshell, what it will diagnose now is, are you swaying too much to the side? So it looks at your ability to control your trunk from moving too far out. And are you braking? It's another one. Are you getting your foot too far out in front of your trunk? And if you have a big braking impulse, that's a lot of load going back into the spine. So this wearable is designed to help you minimize the mechanical load and to maximize energy expenditure by minimizing, how much sway. I kind of look at this device if you had a cube and you have a little dot in the middle of it, and the dot can move with running. The less that dot moves off to the side, the less energy it takes to recover. The more your hips move off to the side like that dot, well, there's going to be a boundary in which stops that dot. What's the boundary? It's going to be your soft tissue. So if your hips are swaying off to the side too much, the soft tissue is going to be taking that mechanical load. And over time, it's going to become inflamed, trying to repair itself, and it's going to become irritated. So that's the side-to-side motion. Plus, if the hips are moving too much to the side, the spine has to compensate to keep you upright. Women and men differ in their motor control strategies. So if a woman's hips let's say a female lands on her right side and their hip goes off to the right, we call it a hip drop. What women will tend to do on average is they will not compensate. Their trunk will lean away from them. So they'll lean away like a C-shaped curve. They oftentimes end up with bursitis in their hip because as they're swaying to the side, they're hitting that barrier over and over. So they'll end up with a lot of lateral or outside leg pain. Men will tend to do something different in this example. If my hip were to drop on the right side, I will tend to, with my trunk, I'll lean over. So I'll do a compensating gait. So women will uncompensate, lean more away. Men will tend to try and lean over it. And then what they do is they create a lot of potential shearing and torsion at the lumbosacral region. And it's micro motion over time, which creates the disc breakdown, the facet breakdown, muscle irritation, and so forth. So that's one of the things we're looking at with this device, is the ability to see your hip swing. The other one would be the braking impulse. And how you would change that is just being aware, if you looked at your braking impulse, it was too large, a backward force, that you can lean your trunk or pull your foot. You can change, this is where running coaches come into play. You can just change your mechanics a little bit, and it's real time right there. Let's say you run another mile, you change your get your foot underneath you a little more, maybe you leaned at the trunk, and say, wow, the braking impulse cleaned up. Now, can you maintain that? Well, that's like anything with weightlifting. It's like now you got to train that particular response. You don't want to do paralysis by analysis, but you're just, again, I'm looking at this as a lifelong, adventure with the running. So I think if people are expecting, this is going to be I would use this device, or I'm going to use this device every time I go out and run. I'm going to tweak some things a little bit to see how my pattern changes. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Is this
Those are good, yeah.
wearable wrist-based, ankle-based? Is there one, two of them? How does that work?
Right now, it goes right across. It's a little belt that you click on, and the device goes over to sacrum, because that's where the mechanical loads from the shoulder and pelvic girdle kind of converge. And what's the reason we picked that area? It's anatomically very distinct. I've cut up tremendous amount of human cadavers when I teach human anatomy, and I can get everything apart in the body except the sacral. That sacral region is like everything ties in there is a fulcrum. So we picked that area because we figured that's where we can measure the forces best between the upper part, lower part, and across the sides. And think about that when you run or walk, opposite arm and opposite leg to go together. So yeah, so it's a wearable. Eventually down the road here, after this version 1 or 2, it'll be something that we can kind of put within people's clothing. But right now, the belt is the best way to do that. So, I mean, right now, some of the potential problems we have is that people that say they're really large, it might jiggle a little bit, and that would disrupt the sensors inside the accelerometers. But we're also, right now, it also goes onto a phone. You're going to collect all your data on your phone.
We've never had anybody on our podcast tell us they've cut up a bunch of people before.
That's
a first. I had another question. Oh, so like, for example, in like your wrist-based Koros, Garmin, Suunto, whatever it is, can a device like that measure something as vertical oscillation accurately, or is that just a wildly inaccurate way to measure something like that, for example, versus if it's attached to your hip or your waist or your sacrum, it's a very objective measure versus a wrist flying through space. What is your opinion on that?
Let me bring Cooper in here because he's tested all this. Let me just have a, what is, this is something we're specifically looking at.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, you can get vertical oscillation pretty well because you can filter that. You can filter out the arm swing. I'd actually like to do some really serious tests on it, but I think what they can't do is measure this. So what Sean's saying is that we're putting our device here on the sacrum. It's right at your body's center, and so it can measure things like the symmetry, and it can measure the forces at your center. So we can pick up a lot of things that you can't get if it's on your arm. I mean, if your arm's up here, it's like that's not telling you what's happening at your center.
What
So,
about
Kirk? Just 1 second here. They sent me one actually, and I use this. Now, I haven't been able. Yeah, I've got hands on a
that's
little
your
bit.
way
Here.
of saying suck it, Kirk?
Well,
Yeah,
by the way, there's a brand new version out that we just released 2 days ago. So
Yeah, I'm gonna ask for the brand new
Just some
version
updates
back.
too.
And to answer your question, I haven't been able to take it on trails because it's on an iOS app, and I only have an iPad. I'm on Android, and I'm not taking my iPad on the trails yet. Haven't gotten to that point. But on the treadmill, it does measure different vertical oscillation compared to my watch. And part of that, I believe, is because my arm carriage changes with speed. Sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher. Sometimes I just progress more through the stride. But my hips, obviously, I don't carry my sacrum any different at any stride type. The second is that with incline, it changes as well. And then the third is on the treadmill, I may be reaching to change things. I'm wiping sweat with a towel. I'm changing YouTube. And that plays into the average vertical oscillation where my hip does not change throughout any of that. So I found that it does actually give different vertical oscillation numbers in the whole of the workout.
Yeah. So a couple things. At this point, we're not actually. So vertical oscillation is a position. So how far you're moving. We're at this time actually only giving you. We call it force. Force equals mass times acceleration. Technically, it's acceleration, but it's the same pattern, right? So it's in G's, G forces. So we're actually not giving vertical oscillation as a position this time. So it is going to be a different measurement.
But cadence is different as well on mine.
Is it? So yeah, so that's
because a single hand stops moving for a while to wipe sweat, and then. So anyway,
it should be insanely accurate for cadence. One other little aside is that you can actually run with the sensor without your phone, but you're not going to get speed and the GPS. We use the phone for the GPS, but if you start the run, you do need that phone or iPad or whatever to start it. And then you can just go for your run and then just switch off the sensor afterwards, and it will save all that data, and then you can download it later. So if you want to, that's all.
Will.
Yeah, Android has come in. We decided to do one thing at a time. It was taking us twice as long to do everything, and it already takes forever. So it's like one thing at a time.
Well,
Although I
right
did
now
find my
we're
old iPhone and charged it up, so I'll be testing that out.
well, the other tail we have, well, we need feedback because I told Cooper, it's been an extraordinary economical investment that we've made in this over several years. In fact, if we back 7 years and you told me what it was going to take, I would not have done this. I mean, but now we're so far down the road. We have an incredible tool. We have up to 38 metrics, but what we're trying to figure out now is limit these metrics, what you can get, so that you can make sense of the few that we're providing. But down the road, I kind of look at it like an Apple computer. Most people only use 1 to 2% of what the computer can do. But this will allow, but if you have more interest, there'll be every metric you can imagine.
Yeah. So something that initially we were like, well, Garmin already does this and Chorus already does this. And, there's already sensors out there. And so our first version, everything was completely unique and we didn't do anything that anybody else had done. And then we started showing it to people and they're like, I don't understand any of this because it was all so unique. So now we're kind of walking that back and it's like, okay, we've got to put a few things like vertical oscillation and things that people are more familiar with. So we've actually kind of like, now we're just kind of replicating some things that we could have done that. Like those are the easy things from my perspective. We kind of started with really hard things. Yeah. So there's a lot in there. And a big thing that we're trying to do now is actually simplify it and make it understandable. Because in the earlier versions, we were just giving people all these numbers and we knew what it was. And so if you do try this new one, it's just been out since Monday. So it's been out for 3 days. We've rearranged all these metrics into a score that's just based on the population of people that we've measured. So everything now is from 0 is bad, 100 is good. So whatever that is, whether it's your braking or your quite a few different metrics, but we've just kind of formulated that. So, even though you want to minimize braking, we're saying like a low braking score means that's bad, like you're braking too much. And so you want to get 100, that means a good score. So it's all in the style. So it's very easy for people to understand what they're looking for. So.
Are there like what would be let's say it says you're getting a low braking score, which would be bad. You're like a 10. Are there like I don't know, tangibles? Like what do you do? Let's say if you get a score that is unfavorable, what's next?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a few things, and a lot of this does come down to like maybe having a running coach or somebody to give you that feedback. But for braking, a lot of times if you're overstriding, you're going to have a big backwards force. If your foot is landing way out in front of your center of mass, that's a backwards force. It's going to slow you down and waste energy. You want to get that foot underneath of you. A super easy way to do that is just to increase your cadence. So if you have a really slow cadence, then you're taking really long strides. But really, you just want to get that foot underneath of your center of mass.
But we provide those.
Yeah.
So we give instructions on.
So some of it, and that's something we call it the pocket coach tips. And so that's something we're going to record a whole bunch more videos, but basically at this time it's more diagnostic as far as like preventing injury. So if it's seen that you have poor hip stability or poor hip mobility, it's going to recommend exercises or stretches. So it's a little thing, you click on that, and it takes you to some videos, and we try to keep it pretty simple. They're short little exercises. We give some demonstrations on how to do a stretch or how to do an exercise them. And that's something we're going to add a lot of that in the next month or so.
And as a quick adjunct, I mean, again, it's specific to the individual. I'm not trying to contradict myself, but there's a lot of powerlifting videos out there. So people want to do that in general. But some of these videos that we're going to spend the day shooting, my daughter's a professional cinematographer. So we're going to spend the whole day doing videos on different hip mobility. There will be some one-legged exercise. Again, I'm not opposed. I'm just saying if you don't have a strong foundation, but there's some individuals still are just they're going to want to go to one-legged. We'll provide those. And again, I'm not taking a religious, I don't have a belief system here. I have biases for sure. And my biases, again, you need to be strong on 2 feet before you move to 1. However, I know that might not work for individuals. So there'll be videos provided. So if you get a low score within a short period of time, there'll be videos on how to correct all of those dysfunctions.
Well, one thing that's really fun with this is you could try different things and see what works for you. And some things work great for some people, not for other people. And so instead of it just being, like a belief system, try it and see if it makes a difference, see if it's better. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It kind of gives you, because there's all these different exercises, all these different philosophies, heel striking, toe striking, and all these different things. Go ahead and put it on and see what it does. But that's something I think is really.
And Elton Cooper's done spend a lot of time playing with mid-foot, forefoot, and you can see how the patterns they're very reliable. They're very unique. It's fun if you're, and I think that we have to start fairly, I'm not going to use the word simple. I'll use the word basic. I think words are important. And sometimes when you say, well, it's a simple concept, my patients get frustrated that they can't fit. So no, it's a basic concept. So I think we need to start out with some basic physics principles. Like when we say force is equal to mass times acceleration, that people say, well, okay, you're using an accelerometer to measure force and you're creating this force portrait. Well, what about the M? It's like, okay, force is equal to your mass times acceleration. Well, your mass is constant. It doesn't change. So we can take that M and throw it out. So force and acceleration are equivalent to one another. And so in these force portraits, what you're measuring is it looks like a trajectory. It's not, you're not following something per se. You are, but you're not. But what it is all the forces coming against you, gravity, force, the wind and all that. Those are the external forces. But then your internal forces that you're generating, that's what creates that overall force portrait. That's what's unique to you. And that's what changes over time. And the goal is to figure out, and again, this is a hypothesis, but it tends to be, people think it's true. The hypothesis, if we run more symmetrically, that we'll have less injuries. Now, we don't know that for sure. It's a hypothesis. It's certainly not at the level of a theory. And we use that word theory too easily. So that's, again, over time, it's like if I ran a 10-minute, let's say I go out and run for 10 miles, I think you look at your watch, eventually it'll be on a watch as well. All your scores are good. At mile 6, you still feel the same. You look at your watch, it's like, whoa, this force portrait has changed considerably. I'm spending 20% more time over on the right. So that could be an indicator, doesn't tell you for sure, that something in the system has changed. Maybe it's a fatigue pattern. So you get home, you download this, and you can follow yourself over time. And you can experiment with, like, okay, every time I hit mile 6, and then you can say, well, I ran the 10 miles. I didn't feel any different, but that last 4 miles was really, and you'll have an intuitive sense. This is why I don't want to water this down too much. I think people are at their core, they're intellectually curious. So I think by providing some basic physics ideas, people will get more interested and then go with their intuition. When you look at those patterns, you should have an intuitive sense of whether it's good or not, if that makes sense. Like, okay, something's not right there. What could I change? Oh, I wonder if I put this band on my leg or I try different shoes. Like, well, that's everything. So again, not telling you what to do. It's providing a tool that you can play with.
No, we haven't done yet. We haven't even said the name of this thing.
Oh, Aletheia run. And Aletheia is a Greek word meaning disclosure. So I designed this with a lot of philosophy involved. It allows me to kind of explore some ideas. And Aletheia means at some point or another in your life, most of the time we spend it in an inauthentic manner, that we're not aware of really who we are. But we come to a clearing in the woods where everything becomes clear. So that's Aletheia. It's a disclosure. So this device, the way I look at it, is disclosing how you and the world and you are interacting with one another. And I'm hoping that gets people a little more excited about trying to experience the world itself. That's what I think is unique about running and running outside. Is, again, this interaction with the world. I think it's incredibly important in terms of all the anxiety and the emotional depression. So, it's a bigger topic to get into, but it's one I'm very fascinated with. I have a lot of young men and women in their 20s and 30s with a lot of emotional anxiety and stress. I've never seen this kind of level since COVID, and it's obviously in the literature. But maybe one way that we can minimize that, or at least positively impact that, was to get people running outside more, and running safely, with some feedback and saying, wow, every time I go out running, now I got plantar fasciitis. Now I got to maybe spend $180 on a pair of shoes. I used to do this. I'd end up with Achilles tendonitis. I'd run on the pressure sensor, and it's clear that my pattern was poor. But I spent $180 on those shoes. Oh, I would keep running in them. Then after a while, like, okay, I wouldn't even get the shoes away. I would just throw them away. I mean, for me, I just got this like, wait a minute, why am I, I made the investment. It didn't work well for me. So anyway, yeah, so it's called Alethea Run. Both of my children are very involved in this project as well. One of my sons has a couple engineering degrees, so he designed the entire website and a lot of the user interface. And then my daughter's a cinematographer, and Connor Rowland, he finished his PhD in physics a few years ago. He's very involved, and Cooper here is a physicist that's been extremely involved from the beginning. It's just been a really, I wouldn't say fun. It's been a very challenging collaborative process. I would just summarize it by saying, if I knew what I was getting into 7 years ago, I would have never done this. But we're there. We finally have a wearable product where I can actually get involved from a clinical perspective now. I got something to use. And the other thing I'm going to do down the road here, I used to teach a lot of continuing education. I think I'm gonna start doing that, maybe like one day courses where we would use the device and have people come into like a running shoe store, and we could use the device. And then what we can do is we can try different shoes, we can try different strategies, other devices, and see if it makes the form a little more ideal, and show people how different uses for the device. With physical therapists and other clinical practitioners, I'm going to teach a class, I think in May in Eugene. I haven't come up with a date. We'll probably bring a bunch of elite runners in and evaluate them for a couple hours, but we'll use our force portraits. Then we'll do some medical treatment interventions, and we'll put the people back and forth on the treadmill, run them, and see if we can change those force portraits for the better. So at the end of the day, it's just, if it's not fun, I'm really not interested at all at this age. I don't have a whole lot of time left. I think everybody that knows me knows I'm obsessed with turning 60, because I know the ride's almost over and you guys are young. You'll get there. It's like everything comes to a head at the age of 60. So it's like, I don't have time to do something that I'm not enjoying at this point. And I think this also allows me to do a lot more interaction with the community, and also get involved with young researchers and hand the baton off to them. I'm hoping this device I think it's got endless amount of possibility. I would say the last thing on this would be, I am fairly convinced that within these force portraits, there's something that we call fractal patterns. I think there's some early diagnostic signs of neuromuscular disease patterns within these. And so we're doing running now. We're going to be doing walking next year. We're doing a big research project on walking with the force portraits. The challenge with walking is we don't get as much data as we do with the running, with the repetitive, and then hopefully this will be a medical device within about 3 years, where people with, if we can pick up early onsetting of like Parkinson's, which I've mentioned before, that would be amazing. So that's one of my things I'm hoping to leave behind, or other young researchers involved in exploring that. So, because we all get impacted by that one way or another as we get older.
So Kirk, I pulled up a picture of one of these. Talked about the butterfly, the force portrait. So like I have the iPad up on my Nordic Track in front there, and it's drawing that as you're running. And so then it's like, all right, I'm gonna adjust my foot plant here, and you can see when there's like a voop and when there's not a voop. Like you can see when it gets tighter and forms a line, or when you get out of symmetry. And I've for a long time said I don't have a pretty stride. I'm a little herky jerky, but it cleans up as I get faster. And it's been interesting to see this draw how I clean up or don't clean up when I think I'm cleaning up moving forward. Like my upper body cleans up, but now my hips are reflecting bad patterns. But it's an instant feedback loop of I can see it, I can work on it. So it's one of the reasons that I said yes to trying this out versus a lot of the things that people reach out via email to us about. It felt like one of the first practical new ideas that I'd come across in a while. So obviously it's in testing phase for me.
Yes.
It's very early, but it's one of the only devices I've been excited about in a while.
That's it was fun to look at when you showed it to me briefly.
It's very
That's helpful.
pleasing,
It's a
isn't it?
satisfying imagery, yeah, actually.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Sean, I want to respect your time, so I think we should wrap this up. I think my last question for you, you dropped a bunch of knowledge bombs. I think you gave a good number of takeaways and ponderings for people. And then, of course, like curiosity with the device. I think my last question is if people want to learn more about you, what you do, and the Alethea run, where do people go check that stuff out?
Instagram, is it, are we Alethea run. Alethea.run.
Okay.
This is not my strength. This is where I have all my younger people. I've actually avoided every aspect of social media
Good
for
for you.
Philosophica. But yeah, that's where you can find us. And I'm willing to participate in all this stuff at this point. Yeah, but yeah, check that out if you got questions. I have a tremendously gifted group of people that I really, really enjoy working with. Armando helped set this up. And Armando is just an incredibly amazing, unique individual. I would say the other thing, my whole team is I try to surround myself with incredibly humble people, and they are. They're all very authentic, and they're very giving in their times. Yeah, but yeah, thank you guys and yeah, if you guys want to get into anything else, I'm sure I created a little bit of controversy. I don't really care. I'm willing to say what I think. It's just my opinion. You don't have to listen to it. So the proof's in the pudding. So yeah, but thank you. But yeah, let me know if you guys need anything else.
We will.
Crazy enough. Yeah. Do you have anything else, Brakken?
No, this necessitates a follow-up episode to follow more of the rabbit holes that you kind of illuminated a little bit today. I think there's a lot of good conversations coming our way. So thank you for today. And
yeah, thank you very much, guys.
And we'll see you next time.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you both. That's it.